In this video, I'm going to show you how to disassemble this lens unit from a ZS19 camera and put it back together again. Now this is the same lens unit that's also in a ZS20, a TZ27, and a TZ30. You'll need a 4/0 Phillips head screwdriver to remove the screws. The first thing we need to do is to remove this flat ribbon cable from the socket here. Just lift up on the black tab to release it, and then pull the flat ribbon cable out. Then put the screwdriver underneath the flat ribbon cable that's actually holding the socket and lift it off of there too. Now we'll remove 6 small screws that are around the edge. The last 2 screws support the zoom motor, so we want to hold our finger underneath the motor as we take those screws out because the motor is going to want to drop away. With the last 2 screws taken out, we can lower the motor and remove it. Now it's going to be connected to the flat ribbon cable, so be careful that you don't pull on it or tear it. Now we can just lift the back right off. Just lift it gently. There's a lot of pieces of plastic that protrude down inside the lens, so lift it straight off. Now for now, we'll just sit this off to the side. Next, we can remove this gear. It just lifts right out. And we can lift the flat ribbon cable up so it's out of that pocket right there. Now we'll remove the outer sleeve of the lens unit. To do that, we're going to have to turn it and push on it in a certain way just to get it to pop up out of these little grooves that are in here. There's a couple of things that we're going to have to watch when we're starting to lift this inside part out. There's 3 spots, one here, and one here. These little tabs that are connected to the inner part fall into a little groove on the outer part. Okay, those are going to have to be lifted up high enough to be clear of that, and at the same time we're going to watch here, and when we can turn it just enough to where we see a post inside here, the whole inner part will lift out of there. So we just put a little pressure on the inner part of the lens unit with our fingers and just lift slightly on just the inner part. Hold the outer part with our fingers just enough until you can see that this is starting to come up, and when that lifts up just a little bit, then you try to turn it and you can see that that post is lined up inside that groove, and when it's inside there you can lift that piece out. Now we're going to need to take this part right here, which is connected to the next inner piece of the sleeve, and we're going to want to push it that way. So you can grab it and just kind of squeeze it, and you can see that it only moves so far. And what we're watching for are these alignment marks right here. Right now they're not lined up, and when you see this one line up with that one, then you'll push on the inner part of the lens and you'll push it that way. Okay, so we'll get our marks lined up, and at the same time push from the bottom. And then it'll come right out. Okay, the next part that we'll take out will be the next inner piece, and what we can do is just grab this top part right here and then turn it clockwise, and you'll see it will start to extend and then if you keep turning it, that part will come off. To remove the next part, just grab this lens part here and this outer ring and lift it up as far as it'll go. Then grab this inner part here and turn this lens this way. Before we take this piece apart, I want to go ahead and operate it just so that you can see how it works. All you have to do is turn this piece clockwise while holding on to this part, and the pieces will move in and out because of the pins that are following these grooves in there. So just turn it. You can kind of get an idea how it works, because this is what we'll get it back to. And it's kind of tricky doing that. So when we go far enough clockwise to where it doesn't go anymore, then you can just lift it out. But go ahead and put it back in. You can see there's a pin right here that'll go into that groove. Just go ahead and put it back in there and then turn it back in just to make sure everything's working. This will give you an idea of how it's supposed to be when we get to this point. The next part that we'll take out is the actual lens unit that's inside. What we'll have to do is to turn this ring that's on the outside counterclockwise as far as it'll go. Then you turn it around and you'll push on the plastic part of this. See it moving? That's the image stabilization. Just gently push down and you'll see that that assembly kind of goes in, and it might turn just a little bit counterclockwise from this angle. And when it does that and you get it down there, you'll be able to turn this ring clockwise again, and at the same time just push down, and this ring will only go so far and it'll stop, but you'll still be able to keep pushing the lens unit all the way through. To remove the last piece, this inner part, what we'll have to do is we'll have to look for these alignment marks. Now this one right here on the side needs to line up with this one that's on the ring. You just get them closely lined up and pull out on it gently as you do, and it'll come right out. So that's every piece of the lens unit taken out. The only part that we didn't take out is the image stabilization, but we shouldn't have to take that out. Before we put this back together, we want to make sure and clean out all of the grooves that are on these pieces of plastic, both on the outside and the inside. We want to get rid of any grit or dirt that happens to be in there so that there isn't any friction when the pieces move. You can use a Q-tip or a brush or a piece of cloth, but whatever you use, just make sure and use air to blow it off afterwards. Don't use compressed air though. Be sure that you clean all of the pieces. If you haven't done it already, Now would be a great time to make sure that your lenses are clean. Use a cloth or a cleaning pin to clean them off. Then be sure to use air to blow away any loose debris. Be very careful on this side because there is a fiber type shutter inside, and too much air pressure could damage it. Be sure to clean this lens as well. Okay, after you have all the pieces cleaned up, we can start putting it back together. The first piece that we're going to put back together is this unit here. We're going to put the shutter assembly back in and this lens unit. But before we do, we want to take a look at this piece first because this is all going to be going back inside here. We want to just find our little alignment triangle, and that's right here. So we just want to kind of locate it first before we actually get to the point of putting it together so that we know what we're looking for. You can see it right along this groove here. You can see it right there. And what we're going to want to do is find a mark on this side to line that up with. Now on here, there's a small mark right here which I believe is an alignment triangle. It's actually just hard to see. You can see it right here. Now if for some reason you can't see it, all you have to do is look for this piece of plastic here that doesn't have any of these fibers connected. It's the only one, and it has a dot right there. So when we get to the point where we have these two pieces inside here, that's what we're going to want to do, is to find those two marks, this one here, and then this mark this side here. And we're going to want to line those two up when we insert it. Okay, but before we do that, we're going to put these two pieces in. We'll insert the shutter assembly into this unit first. So make sure and get the flat ribbon cable in there. Now, there aren't any alignment marks that I know of, but what I did is I just looked for this same piece of plastic that has that little dot on there, and then the post that's sticking out that's with the motor at 3 o'clock, this post then will be straight up. That goes into the groove that's on the left of these two right here. So you can see this dot right here, and then the three posts, and they're all in the groove that's on the left of these two. Once you've got it started inside like that, you can just take and push the entire unit all the way down as far as it'll go. So you can see the three posts that were sticking out that are in the grooves are at the bottom of the grooves now. Now we'll put the lens unit in. What we want to look for is this notch on the back side of the lens. We want to make sure that that lines up with the motor down inside. So when you're putting it on there, you can see from this side, you can tell where that notch is because it's a bump on this side. Just line up these posts, the 3 posts coming off of this, line those up with the groove that's on the right side of these two. And then just double check and make sure that this part here lines up and goes over that motor. Once you've got it lined up, you can push it down inside. Now we'll go ahead and insert this piece into here. So what we're going to want to be looking for is we're going to want to take these posts, or these pins that are sticking out from the lens unit and the shutter assembly, and we want to line them up with these 2 grooves that start on top. And you can see them right here. Now there's 3 sets of those on this piece of plastic. So we're going to want to make sure that we're using the right grooves for the right pins. So now we'll insert this part into this piece. We'll want to find those alignment marks that we found earlier. Here's this one. And on the lens unit, remember we were using this dot on this piece of plastic for our alignment. So we'll take the alignment mark on this piece and we'll have it straight up. And on this piece, we'll have our alignment mark straight up on here. But what we want to do with this piece now is rotate it 120 degrees this way, so that the dot, our alignment mark, is now down here. Then put it inside. Then we need to align these 2 pins with the 2 grooves that start right on top here. So we can see the pins and the grooves right here. Now one thing you want to make sure of before you actually push it all the way in there is make sure that the shutter assembly and the lens are both at the bottom of the grooves when you do that. Then just put it in as far as it'll go, and then turn it slightly counterclockwise. Then just push down slightly and turn it clockwise, and you'll hear it snap into place. And once it does that, you can turn it and operate the lens. Now we'll add this piece to the lens assembly. Look for the alignment mark on this piece. You can see it right here, right at the beginning of this groove. And on our shutter assembly, just look for the same mark that we've been using, except look over on the left side and you'll see a smaller one pointing the opposite direction. That's the alignment mark that we want to use now. Now before we put these 2 pieces together, make sure that on this lens unit that it's turned as far as it'll go counterclockwise. Then line the 2 alignment marks up, this one and this one, and what we're going to be doing is inserting a pin that's on the back side of this alignment mark into the beginning of this groove. And there's 3 of them, and we'll be doing all 3 of them at once. Once you have all 3 of them lined up, just take and turn this piece counterclockwise so that it starts sliding up that groove. Then you can operate it and make sure it's working okay. The next part that we'll put on is the main lens. Two things that we want to do before we put the lens on. First is find our alignment mark again. That's right here. Second is we want to make sure that the lens unit is extended out as far as it'll go. So turn this piece clockwise as far as you can. Now be careful that you don't let this part drop back out. For an alignment mark on the lens unit, there is a small triangle way down inside that you can look for, and what we're going to do is we're going to identify one of these three posts that are on here. The post that we want to use is actually lined up with the name of the lens, so it's easier just to look at the name here, and whichever post is behind it is the one that we're going to be working with. So take the post that lines up with the name and insert it into the beginning of this little groove right here, right where the alignment mark is. Then make sure that the other two are also in the grooves. Now you may need to push on it just a little bit to make sure it snaps into place. And once it's in as far as it'll go, you should be able to turn the inner part of the lens and see that everything works. To test the lens unit and make sure everything's working right, put it all the way down, and you'll see there's three posts that are along the edge here. Just take a screwdriver and push that as far counterclockwise as you can. You'll see that when you do, that the lens cover will close. So if it's doing that, you've got everything right. The next part that we're going to put on is the inner sleeve that goes over the lens unit. Before we can put it on though, we're going to need to look for an alignment mark, which is right here. You can see it right here. It's a small triangle. To put it on, just hold the lens unit so it's in the upright position. Slide the sleeve over the top so that that alignment mark is right on top. So you can see it's going right over the top of that lens unit. You can see it goes down, and on this spot right here, you can see where these two posts line up. You can see these two posts right here that line up with each other. There's a gap in between it. Even as you push on it, there's a gap. It's as far as it'll go. But what you need to do is just turn it clockwise a little bit until it falls in place that direction. Then just turn it counterclockwise until it comes back, and you'll feel it snap into place, and these two things will line up, and there's no gap in between them anymore. Be sure to test it, so just grab hold of the sleeve that you just put on and lift on it very lightly and turn clockwise just a little bit. Once it's up slightly, then you can see these bumps that we were just referring to align it. Put your finger on two of them and pull up and turn clockwise to extend it, and counterclockwise and down to retract it. And you can see that it's working. Now we'll put the outer sleeve on. So we'll want to do the same thing here. We'll want to locate the alignment mark. And you can see the small triangle right here, which is the alignment mark. And we'll do the same thing with this one. We'll put the alignment mark so that it's up in relation to the top of the lens unit. Just put it right over the top. Okay, when you push it on there, you can see that it stops and it leaves a gap, and it's not seated all the way. All you have to do is just turn the sleeve just slightly clockwise, and then you'll see it goes down into place even further. You can see that it's touching right here on these posts that are sticking out, and that's what's keeping it from going in any further. What we need to do now is rotate this outer piece of plastic here counterclockwise so that we can get this bump that's connected to it to line up with this groove right here. Now there's two other sets that are 120 degrees around here, one over here and one here. So when we turn that, all three of them will be lining up. And you can feel it snap into place once you get it lined up good. Now you can see that everything is flush. Now we'll put the outer sleeve back on. We'll find an alignment mark on this one right here. You can see it right here. And just like with the other two, just line up the alignment mark here so that it's on top in relation to the top of the lens. And just slide it over. So we can see the alignment mark on the outer sleeve right here, and we can see that it's lining up with the alignment mark on the sleeve below it. The last thing that we have to do to get this piece to sit down as far as it should inside this outer sleeve is we need to take this part right here that's sticking out, and we need to move it over so that it lines up with this groove right here. Now there's two other ones on here that are 120 degrees offset. So when you're moving it over, you're going to be moving all three of them. So you need to make sure that all three are lined up, and when they are, then just push it down so that it seats in there properly. You can test it by putting your thumbs on the inside of the last outer sleeve that we just did. Just put it on the inside and then put your fingers on the outer edge and just gently push in with your thumbs. And you can see that everything's working. And then just push it back in. You shouldn't have to push it very hard. Now we're ready to put the back piece back on. Before we do, there's a couple things that we need to do with the lens. First, put our thumbs back on here and just push the lens down inside just a little ways. Now we need to take this flat ribbon cable and line it up with the notch over here and push it down inside. You'll also see that this part is lining up, and it should be sitting at the bottom of this notch right here. Okay, next you want to put in the plastic gear that goes in this little hole right here. Just set it inside. Now we'll put the back piece on. What we need to look for is this flat post that comes off the back piece. That's going to go down inside that notch that the flat ribbon cable is in. We'll actually put it down in between the two pieces of flat ribbon cable. So just line that up so that it goes down inside there. Then you also want to check and make sure that the little bump that's on the back piece goes down inside the gear that we just put in. And then just generally look at it and make sure that everything is sitting down flush. And if it looks good, then just take and put your thumbs on the back, and with your fingers pull the lens all the way back in. That way we know everything is working fine in there and nothing is hung up. Now we can go ahead and put 4 of the screws back in the cover. Now line up the zoom motor. You can see there's a post right here that hole in the zoom motor goes into. And then we'll put the 2 screws in. The last things that we need to do is to put the flat ribbon cables back down where they belong and connect them up. So we'll pull this one back and we'll lay this one down, and you'll see there's a couple of posts down here that these holes in this flat ribbon cable will go through, and that'll hold it down in place. Then with that down there, we can make sure that this black tab is up, and we'll insert the flat ribbon cable in there and then push the tab down. And finally, we'll just take and tuck this little piece of flat ribbon cable right here into a notch that's right behind it. And we're good to go. Everything should be fine. Now we can put it back in the camera and try it out.